Hello and welcome to another installment of our Made in Manitoba webinar series. Very happy to have with us Kevin Christensen, a PhD candidate at the University of Manitoba, as well as a service provider through the Canadian Sports Centre Manitoba. Another one of our great resources is here in the province, and working closely with Dr. Adrian Leslie Toogood, who you may have heard from earlier in our webinar series. So great, Kevin, for joining us today and providing some time and making some time, knowing that things are very different right now and how we need to connect with everybody and people in your industry doing such great work around the mental performance and training, and in a time where we are really leaning on those expertise. So I appreciate you making the time to chat with us and our athletes and people that will be watching. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I'll turn it over to you to start leading us through today's conversations.
Thank you so much, Kylo. I really appreciate the opportunity to come in and to share some of these ideas with the athletes. As you mentioned, this is a kind of different time that we're in right now, and so hopefully today we'll be able to kind of talk about some things that we can do to help learn from and manage these situations that will help us not just over the next however many weeks we are facing our current reality, but also once we do get back to training and competition like normal. Hopefully there's some things that we can apply in those settings as well. So as I was putting this together and looking at the topic of stress and anxiety is a big issue for a lot of athletes at this point, and something that I think everybody's dealing with in various ways. And I was thinking, are we dealing with stress? Are we coping with stress? Are we managing with stress? And I thought, no, I think it's better if we're growing with stress, because I think this is an opportunity and a chance to learn and to improve and to get better, and to become better athletes in the process. So why don't we get started with a little bit of introduction? When we talk about these things, let's start off. What is it that we're talking about? What is stress? And so I think stress often has a really kind of negative connotation, or can be kind of a scary thing, and people talk about stress as a bad thing. And I don't really see it that way. And so I just kind of want to highlight first that stress can actually be a really good thing in a lot of ways. The background on this slide is a woman, strength training. Stress is what causes adaptation. Stress is what causes growth. Stress is what causes improvement. It's why we change. It's why we make progress. When we go into the weight room or go into the gym and stress our bodies, that's when we become better athletes. And so it really is an opportunity not just for something negative or something to be fearful of, but stress can be something that can be really positive, and can have some really beneficial impacts. And so what is it that we're talking about? Well, really, stress is simply increased demands on our systems, right? And I realize that's kind of broad and kind of vague, but it's because it does apply in so many different areas. And so when we talk about, if you go out for a run and you go run for a long time, you're increasing the demands on your cardiovascular system, right? If you go into the weight room and are in our strength training, you're increasing the demands on your muscular system. When we rest and recover and respond to those stresses, that's when we improve. That's when we grow. So really, anytime that we're looking at, okay, we're requiring more of what we normally have, that's what we look at as stress. We're increasing the demands on a system. Okay? Now, those systems, I've given a couple of examples, just related to our anatomy and our physiology, but that's true of not just those things, but also kind of more broadly in other areas of our lives as well. So here I want to show a little bit um, of kind of how these systems interact and relate. And so, at the very center of this, we have our little picture of a baby here. But you can imagine, yourself or another athlete right at the center of this. And some of the exact terminology doesn't really matter quite so much. So don't worry about keeping those things straight. But the important thing to note here, important thing to take away, is that all of these systems that we exist within, right, all interact and play together. So we start at the very center with that person right in the middle. And then as we slowly kind of expand and go outwards, we start to interact with other areas of our lives, other people in our lives, other contexts that influence us, right? And so that might include, family. It includes school. We're seeing a lot more interaction with our healthcare system these days than maybe we're used to, than hopefully we're used to. It includes, teammates and coaches and other kind of other people involved in your sport organization, right? As we continue to kind of move further and further out, we start to see, okay, we see neighbors, we see friends of family, we see friends of friends. The media is a big one, the messages that we hear and receive and consume from other sources interacts and influences us, right? And then when we get, out kind of global scale, we know that right now we're dealing with global issues. And so all of these things play together, right? And increasing stress, increasing demands on one part of this system or one of these systems is going to interact and increase the demands on other parts of those systems. Right now, increased demands on our healthcare system means that everybody else is staying home, right? That's not necessarily something that's directly related to me, but I am feeling the impact of that, right? And all of you as athletes are as well. So we really wanted to highlight how all of these things interact and play together, and to recognize that even if things are relatively consistent for you, the increased demands on other parts of the systems are still going to have an impact on you. And so it's important to kind of recognize that and be aware of that.
Kevin, I really like that visual as far as athletes recognizing sort of how those things, as you say, impact them, where it may be something that's, a couple circles outside of their control, but it's going to have that chain effect. And I think we often don't consider that because it's so far removed, but it really does have those impacts on us as we look at the other factors in that chain that impact it. So I think that's a really good visual for our athletes, in any setting, to understand that any topic, any situation is going to have some sort of a trickle-down effect. It may be very minor or maybe very large as we are now, but understanding that all of those things are connected. It's a great visual. I love that.
Absolutely. If you participate in a team sport, that whatever my teammate does has an impact on me.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And if you're not in a team sport, but if you're an individual sport, what my coach does has an impact on me. And so we can't escape from those kind of interconnected components to it.
No, absolutely.
So revisiting this idea of stress then, and recognizing all these increased demands that we're facing, where we start to run into trouble, I mentioned that stress can be a good thing. Where it starts to become, something to struggle with, or it starts to become a bad thing, is when those demands begin to exceed our ability to cope, right? When we put more weight on the bar than we can handle, right? That's when we get hurt. When we try to run further or for longer than we ever have before, that's when our systems start to fail, right? And so that's kind of what we're seeing in a lot of parts of the world right now, is the demands that we've kind of placed on all these systems are outstripping their capacity. Right? So one way that I like to kind of think about this idea, I frame it kind of as a mental gas tank, right? And so when you hop in your car and you're driving around, you have a certain amount of gas, and everywhere that you go is going to use up some of that gas. Right? Some trips might be short, some trips might be long, some trips might be really fuel efficient, where you can just get out on the highway and cruise, and other times you're going to be stuck in traffic and stop and start all the time, and you're going to be really inefficient that way. At the end of the day, once you run out of gas, that's all you can do. Right? You don't get to go anywhere else. You don't get to be in control anymore once you've run out of gas. And so, at best, you can hope to coast in whatever direction that you were going, but you stop being kind of an active participant in that trip. Right? And I like to kind of think of our mental and emotional resources in exactly the same way. So you get up and you go to work or you go to school, and that uses up some gas. You go to practice, and that uses up some gas. You go to the gym and do your workout, that uses up some gas. Maybe there are other things going on in your personal life that are going to use up some gas, right? I think a lot of people have kind of been in that position where they get home at the end of the day and say, you know what, I don't mind making dinner, right? I just need somebody else to pick, right? At that point, you just don't have the mental energy. You don't have the mental gas to make that choice, right? I can carry out, I can do the steps on automatic pilot. That's fine. I can be on cruise control. That's fine. I can coast, but I just don't have the mental energy to do that, right? So it makes it important to be thoughtful and mindful and considerate of how much gas am I using, right? How much gas do I have in my tank?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the ways that I can make things a little bit more fuel efficient for myself, make things a little bit easier? If I know that I have a quarter tank of gas, maybe now is not the right time to try and go on a cross-country road trip. If I know that I have a full tank, hey, go for it, right? Pedal to the metal, let's go have a good time. Doesn't necessarily mean that I can't go on the road trip. Just means that maybe I need to stop and refuel first. And so in sport, a lot of times, yeah, you know what? If at the end of a 7-day training camp, I know that I don't have much left in my mental gas tank, maybe the last day of that training camp is going to be not quite the right time to really try and push myself to do something new or do something creative. Maybe what I need to do is spend some time refilling that tank.
Kevin, one of the things I think about as you're talking about this was in Adrian's session, she talked about knowing yourself.
Yes.
As an opportunity for athletes to, as a coach myself, I could see really talking to the athletes and saying, as a reflection, check in before you're about to do something. Like, where's your gas tank at? And it gives them that opportunity to sort of check in with themselves.
Absolutely. We have a low fuel light on our dashboard for a reason.
And I ignore mine all the time.
Yes, absolutely. Me too.
Never gets me anywhere.
I do it. I do it physically, literally, and I do it figuratively, metaphorically sometimes as well. Is that I don't pay enough attention to that fuel gauge, but it's an important thing to do. And so the more that you can do that, the better off that you're going to be.
That's a great one, because it's definitely gotten me in trouble by not paying attention to that.
Yes, absolutely. So, with that idea, kind of keeping that in mind, yes, we want to be conscious of our gas tank. We want to try to make things as fuel efficient as possible. Also, we want to try and refill the tank whenever we can, right? Because that'll kind of come and go throughout the day and at different times. Different people are going to refill that tank in different ways, right? And that will change for you. I'm going to refill my tank, in different ways than you will, Kylo, and there may be ways that I fill my tank today that don't work for me tomorrow, right? They're going to use up gas tomorrow, just depending on what's going on in my life and whatever my kind of personal situation is. Different people are going to respond in different ways, and so trying to kind of keep that in mind as we look for ways to get ourselves that energy that we need. Other thing to remember is that there isn't always a gas station nearby when you need it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So try to refuel whenever you can. If you have 5 minutes where you can, just kind of get a quick top up, what is it that I can do, as I'm riding the team bus, or as I'm just standing here doing the dishes, is there something that I can do to kind of refill my tank in the moment, so that a little bit later on, when I have to do the thing that's actually hard, right, then I still have the energy that I need in order to do it. So a few tips that I just kind of want to share. As I said, different things are going to work for different people at different times and in different ways. So absolutely individualize it. But a few things that I want to share in terms of what might be helpful for people. I say that personalize it, but this is across the board for everybody. Sleep is going to fill your tank. Getting your proper rest, getting your proper recovery, is going to fill your tank, bar none, no exceptions. Trust me on that one. That'll be consistent for everybody across the board.
It's like the max refuel, or putting premium gas in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the premium gas. I love that. Yeah, sleep is your premium gas. Another one, proper nutrition. Now, proper nutrition, that does mean kind of personalized nutrition, and so knowing what your body needs in order to refuel, and knowing what you need individually. Again, what I need is going to be very different from what you need. So this isn't a kind of one size fits all. And I understand that there's going to be another webinar that is going to have one of our dietitians speaking. So they'll be able to give you a lot better advice as to what that means. But certainly, taking care of your nutrition is an important one. Sometimes having some structure and routine can be really good. You can kind of take your brain off off the gas pedal, and go on cruise control a little bit. Having some of that consistency, right? If you're driving to work, you're taking the same route every day, right? You're going to be pretty efficient at getting there. If you're going somewhere where you've never been before and you're doing something completely different, you're not necessarily going to take the straightest route, right? And so having something that you can kind of fall back on, that you're comfortable with, can often be a really good way to be a little bit more fuel efficient. Spending some time in nature, spending some time outside. I know at this time it's a little bit difficult, but getting out for a walk or getting out for a bike ride can be really valuable. Maintaining as much social connection as possible is important. People are social creatures. We didn't evolve to completely isolate. So trying to remain connected to people as much as we can is really important. And then when you are training, having some kind of non-sport hobbies and things like that. Overall, listen to yourself. Stay tuned to what it is that you need, and that's going to work for you. Something else that I wanted to share, something that has gotten a lot more interest and ground in sport, and I think just kind of broader culture at this point, is the idea of mindfulness. And so, really, mindfulness is just about thoughtfully paying attention to your experiences without judging them. Hey, I have a full tank of gas. Okay, cool. What does that mean, right? What does that mean that I can do with my day? Versus I have a quarter tank. That's totally fine too. But it might mean that I want to plan differently. It might mean that I want to prepare differently. So when you're trying to train and compete, being aware of those things, it's as we say, keeping an eye on that fuel gauge to help you out. Now is kind of a time when you might feel like you have a little bit more flexibility or free time on your hands. So if this is something that might be new to you, could be an interesting time to kind of explore it. If it's something that's familiar to to you, then that's great already. I've included some of, it's really popular these days to practice mindfulness with the help of a guided, some kind of guide, usually in the form of a recording or an app. So I've included some of the more popular ones. Again, not everything is going to click or hit home for everybody. So feel free to kind of experiment with a couple and try it out and say, yeah, you know what, this worked for me. That didn't really work for me. What is it that I was kind of hoping that was going to do that didn't work? What was it that I enjoyed about that? Feel free to kind of experiment and things like that.
Kevin, I think you touched on it. It would be great for our athletes, again, using this time wisely, or what can we do now? And that idea of sampling some of these things. And, when we have our structures in place, where we have our school day and our training programs and our homeworks, and making sure that sleep is front and foremost in our recovery and our preparation, we don't often get the time to try out some of the new things that
experiment a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. This is a great opportunity now to try a couple of things that we haven't been able to include in our preparation that, we've heard have been told to us over and over that, if you can do this, it'll help. If you can do this. And it's just like, well, when do I have the time? Well, and now we might have some of that opportunity.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are just kind of a few ideas. But if athletes have other questions or concerns, or this sounds like something that's kind of interesting or exciting to them, we have contact information. Feel free to reach out to me or to one of the other mental performance consultants and coaches available through Sport Manitoba if you have questions about any of this type of stuff. So those are a few things that I just kind of want to share around the concept of stress. Right, and these kind of increased demands, and how do we want to approach that, and how do we understand those things? One of the other things that we're dealing with, or a lot of people are dealing with right now, and it's kind of the other theme of this, is the idea of anxiety. So stress, anxiety, fear, nervousness, all of these terms get used together and often kind of interchangeably. And they're very similar. There kind of some subtle differences. But when I think about anxiety, I understand anxiety as kind of worry about something unknown, right? And right now we're facing a lot of unknowns, right? There are a lot of things that are unpredictable. We haven't really gone through something like this before. However, as athletes, that is something that we deal with a lot, right? Is unpredictability and unknowns. And so for a lot of athletes, maybe you might be particularly well set up to capitalize on anxiety and to grow with anxiety. And if it's something that starts to stand in your way, maybe it can be really valuable to learn to process those things so that you can apply them to your sport as well. So again, anxiety, not necessarily a bad thing, right? Worry is not necessarily a bad thing. A little bit of worry right now probably makes some sense, right? There are a lot of unknowns. A little bit of worry is probably a good thing. A little bit of worry is what makes you put on your seatbelt and wear sunscreen, and makes you keep washing those hands these days.
Exactly.
And stay kind of socially or physically distanced. It makes sense that there would be some anxiety, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, when it starts to interfere with your sport or with other areas of your life, that's maybe when it becomes something that we want to address kind of head on. So some common signs of anxiety, if you're not totally sure what that might mean or how that might play out. Again, no one size fits all, but these are some of the common ones. You might find that you have an increased heart rate, or find that you're sweating. You might feel like you're kind of short of breath. Might feel agitated or irritable or kind of restless, or you might have difficulty sleeping. can be pretty common. As well, often people, when they feel more anxious, they'll find that their thoughts or their mind is kind of racing, going nonstop, ideas and thoughts coming really rapidly and steadily, or things are kind of bouncing around and everything's kind of disconnected, and I have a really hard time focusing on one thing for any extended period of time. Are some of the kind of common signs of anxiety. And often when that happens, when we find those thoughts racing and bouncing around, it gets really tempting to try and limit that, right? Or to try and stop that and say, oh, okay, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't think about that. Put that out of your mind. And unfortunately, that rarely works well. One of the things that we know is, well, actually here, I'll start with a little demonstration. So, Kyle, maybe you can join me here, and if people watching along want to maybe kind of pause the video as we do it for the next minute or so. If you pull out a clock, I won't make you go for the whole minute there, Kylo. But if people following along want to pause and find a timer or find a clock, and for the next minute, whatever you do, don't think about chocolate cake. Have you already thought about chocolate cake? I'm guessing that you already have. And
I'm looking to see if we can go buy one right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for people who did pause the video and stop there with us, I'm going to bet that at some point during that minute you thought about chocolate cake. I'm going to guess that if you did manage to avoid it, you used up a whole lot of that mental gas trying to avoid it. And usually what happens is those thoughts come back more frequently. They come back stronger. They're just more often, right? And they any time that we spend trying to shut those thoughts down, very rarely, if ever, works, right? As humans, our brains and our bodies are really, really, really bad at processing the word "don't," right? We evolved to pay attention to stuff so that, hey, there's something that's chasing me, or that thing's going to eat me. I need to pay attention to that, right? We're really not good at tuning other things out, and so we see that a lot of times in sports. I like to golf, and I find that anytime that I'm standing over the ball and I think, okay, don't hit it in the water. Don't hit it in the water. Don't hit it in the water. Where's the first place that ball's going? Straight up, right? And that's just kind of the way that we're wired, and that's the way that our bodies work, which makes it kind of unfortunate. But I want to share something else that we can do to kind of hopefully sort of flip that around. So oftentimes when I work with athletes, when we're feeling the anxiety build up, right? When we're feeling those, when we're seeing those thoughts bouncing around and racing all the time, it can be really important and valuable to kind of ground ourselves, right? When everything feels unstable and unpredictable, if we can kind of ground ourselves in, what's going on right now? What is my experience right in this moment? Right? And so I like to do this little countdown exercise, I call it. And Kylo, maybe you can do it with me here. Start by just kind of getting yourself comfortable and taking a few deep breaths. Just nice, long, slow, deep breaths. And if you're watching along on the video, you can join us in doing this. And we'll start by just naming and describing, again, not with any kind of judgment or criticism, but with objectivity, remaining neutral, and with a little bit of curiosity and openness, 5 things that you can see. So I'm sitting here in my home office, and I have some pictures up on my wall with family in them. So I've got a couple of pictures. They seem to be, I think I got 5x7 size picture. They're in black frames. The frames are kind of beveled, so they're kind of slanted from one edge to the other. I have a black and white coffee mug on my desk that I have some pens and pencils and things in. It's black around most of it. There's some white around the base, some white around kind of the mouth and the lip of it, and a little bit of white on the handle. Looking out my window here, generally a blue sky today, a few little wisps of clouds, and I can see a tree off in the distance here just kind of gently kind of swaying or blowing in the breeze. Okay. So then I would go through and pick a couple more, 5 things that I can see, then go on to 4 things that I can feel. So I can feel, the collar of my shirt kind of rubbing against my neck. I can feel my legs and my feet connected to and the weight of my body on my chair and on the floor. As I've been stuck inside and unable to go to the gym, I've been running on our treadmill a fair bit, and I can feel that my knee is not particularly happy about that. So I feel a little bit of kind of stiffness or soreness in my knee there. 3 things that I can hear. Right? Well, I can hear the fan of my computer whirring a little bit. I can hear the sound of my own voice and a little bit of echo kind of through my headphones as I'm doing it. And I can hear somebody in another part of the house. Sounds like walking around a little bit. 2 things that I can taste or smell. Well, I can taste a little bit of the coffee that I had just before we started this call, and I have a candle in my room that in my office here that I like to use while I'm working, so I can still kind of smell a little bit of that candle. And then one thing that I want to focus on right now, and that might be what is the message that I'm trying to deliver during this webinar. That might be what is something that I feel really good about. What's something that I'm grateful for. What's something that I really enjoy about this process. If you're in competition, maybe it's what's one form or kind of technical cue that I want, right? As I'm preparing to compete, what's one kind of strategic component? Where do I want to hit this serve, or where do I want to place this shot? Might be one thing that you want to focus on. So as we kind of do that countdown, we took a few minutes doing this, and one thing that I love about this exercise is that you can spend 30 seconds doing this, you can spend a minute doing this, you can spend an hour doing this, whatever time fits your situation and fits your needs. It can be adjusted to do that. As we've been spending a few minutes doing this, Kylo.
Yep.
Have you been thinking about chocolate cake?
I have not thought about the chocolate cake anymore, as a matter of fact. It was interesting. I was able to listen to you walk through your countdown, and I also was sort of doing mine at the same time, which I didn't think would be possible. But as you were talking about the 5 things, I was looking out my window, and I was able to both hear you running through your process, but then also maintain my countdown at the same time and do the same process, which I thought was neat. I would have assumed that I had to be in, quiet area for myself to do it and alone. But to your point at the end, you can pretty much do it anywhere at any time with the amount of time you have available to you. So I thought that I would never had I looked at that slide and not had you walk through it and done it at the same time, I would have imagined it was a process I needed to do in isolation, away from everything.
But you know what? If you're standing on the pool deck, or wherever you are getting ready to getting ready to compete, there might be a lot of noise and music and a lot of other things going on. That's okay. You can tune into those things.
Yeah.
And that'll help to kind of get you out of your head in terms of the other kind of anxiety or worry that might be there. And as we say, if that thought of chocolate cake is pushed out, right,
Mm-hmm.
works a whole lot better to look at what we do want to focus on rather than what we don't want to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Great.
so hopefully that's something that the people watching can practice on their own. Again, as I say, this is a time when you maybe have a little bit more kind of flexibility. So this is something that you can kind of practice doing on your own and kind of get comfortable with, so that when you go out there and are training and are competing, it's not completely foreign to you. It's not something really new, but it's something that you're pretty comfortable with at that point.
Yeah, Kevin, as a coach, for sure, I could see that now that we've gone through it and talked through it a bit. Talking to some of my athletes, I coached field lacrosse for a period of time as one of my sports that I was involved with, and I could really see our goaltenders, our midfielders, our attack, our long poles during situations in a game, using it to reset and refocus and sort of grab that opportunity to really come back to what's important versus letting those thoughts and ideas bounce around on what may have just happened. And then also in that preparation period prior to game, pre-game time, or in our warm-ups or in our different things, like, so very practical that can be
Absolutely.
used. But you're right, practicing it and doing it now and being comfortable with it, so that when it is competition time, it is much more a familiar routine for an athlete to use.
Absolutely. Um, so then, as I talked about, what are some of those things that, you get down to the end and say, what is it that I want to focus on right now? A few ideas, as I say, there's all kinds of things that you could be choosing to focus on. A few ideas that you might want to consider. What are the things that I can control? Right? We talked already about the uncertainty and the unpredictability that we're facing right now. Sometimes it's good to kind of take back a little bit of that control. What are the things that I can still influence? Right? Maybe that means I can control the training that I do at home. Maybe it means controlling my rest and recovery and my nutrition and things like that. Maybe it means, focusing on my schoolwork when I need to, or focusing on my job when I need to. Those are some of the things that are within my control. Think about, what do I want to bring to this situation? Who am I when I'm at my best as an athlete and as a person, right? Am I really light and outgoing and cheerful and things like that? Is that when I get my best performance? Or do I get my best performance when I'm really focused and honed in and really kind of locked into that zone? What do I want to bring to the situation? One that I really love. What am I grateful for in this moment? What am I grateful for at this time? We get it. A lot of things are less than ideal right now, and we wish, sometimes that we wish we could change some things, but at the same time, there's a lot to appreciate, and there's a lot to be grateful for. What are the things that you love about your sport, right? There are going to be times when your sport is hard. There are going to be times when your sport is disappointing. What are the things that you appreciate about it? What are the things that you love about it, whether it's the competition or your teammates or various things like that? And, how do I picture myself at the end of all this? What is kind of the goal or the motivator, and say, okay, you know what, when this is all over, what do I want to have learned? What do I want to kind of take away from all of this? And that can maybe serve as a little bit of a reminder and motivator to do whatever it is that you want to be doing.